And so, folks, as those guys, as everybody sort of starts to wind down, we're going to meet some of our panelists for our next discussion. And we're very happy to have them here with us today. Councilmember Chris Hines from Denver, Colorado. Councilmember, you and I saw each other just about a year ago, and it's good to see you again. I can't wait until...
Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
I don't know if you remember, we were standing outside and it was freezing cold, and I would give anything to be able to be in person outside, even if it was freezing cold again. And I can't wait till we're able to do that again.
I hope that that this is a gentle way to identify, obviously in this virtual environment, you were doing the standing. I'm actually the first person, elected official in Denver's history who uses a wheelchair for mobility. So that's not meant to be a scolding, but just an opportunity for me to share that something that we would not know in a virtual platform at all, that just because you couldn't see the wheelchair using Zoom. So
isn't that the truth? You know, and that speaks to so much, and it is so very true. And you know, just not being able to be in person limits us so much. So I can't wait till we're able to do it again. Somebody who's been a longtime friend of mine, Molly Alexander, Executive Director of the Austin Downtown Alliance Foundation. And Molly, I believe you've been a very active participant with the International Downtown Association. So we have a lot of IDA members that are joining us here today. A lot of people who really care about downtown alliances around the country. It's great to see you.
Nice to see you too, Matt. Thank you for having us.
I've seen you so much over 20 years. If we average it out, we're still doing okay. But I sure would like to see you alive and in person sometime soon.
Well, I'm downtown quite a bit, so we should join up in a park or at an outdoor cafe.
Oh, great. And then two great practitioners who are going to bring some really great discussion to us today. Roman Pedan is the CEO of KASA. KASA brings a urban short-term rental or urban flex real estate model accommodation for a very particular type of traveler to urban markets. Roman, how are you doing?
Doing well. Great to be here. I'm actually staying in one of our units in Salt Lake City today, so always trying to experience our own product.
Oh, great. That's great. And Adam Rosenberg is the head of regulatory affairs for House. I get to speak to Adam quite often. And Adam, if I remember correctly, are you in Nashville now?
That's correct. Yeah, enjoying different kind of scenery down here.
Great, beautiful, beautiful town. So for many of the participants who are joining us, there are people, for all of our panelists who are joining us today, you guys didn't get to see yesterday. We started off with a session on European best practices, had a council member from Porto, a couple of different representatives from different communities in Europe. And then some of the other discussions we've had have been more focused on the more traditional vacation destination markets. But this discussion is about urban markets and a kind of a solution that I see as one that truly works for so many council members and mayors and different stakeholders that I get to speak with. So we look forward to this. So one thing, just to begin the conversation, so many of the attendees of the discussion don't always get to hear about this, is the type of accommodation we're speaking about, short-term rental, or this is a little bit of more of the urban multifamily mixed-use commercial zoned properties we often will refer to as flex real estate or flex rentals. They really speak to a different type of traveler, typically staying for a longer period of time. If I remember correctly, often the length of stays are more closer to 4 days pre-COVID, 4 days, closer to maybe having two guests staying, possibly even three guests staying, often a family or a related couple or related group traveling together, as opposed to a hotel in an urban market, which is very much closer to one single night. I think it's, if I remember correctly, the national average is 1.1 nights. And again, it's 1.01 or 1.02 guests. It's a person, sometimes two. I often think of it as, you know, you're often with your significant other at most for a night or two. My wife will put up with me and my daughter in a hotel for a night. But if we're staying for more than a night or two, this is when we'll tend to look for a different type of accommodation. So we'll talk a little bit about that, about what differs this type of accommodation from, you know, others and the different type of travelers that we see. And I think a good place to start with that is Roman, because you probably get to see a lot of these different types of travelers. What are the types of guests that you get in your properties? How are they business travelers? And talk to us a little bit about the type of people you saw pre-COVID and then the type of guests that you're getting now during COVID.
Yeah, absolutely. So just for context, we operate across about 35 municipalities, 50 buildings, coast to coast, down the middle of the country. So what we're seeing is really national trends, and I think representative of what is happening out there. I think what you said is really perfectly captured what's happening. Our use is complementary to hotel use, and actually I think complementary to the multifamily use. It's increasingly, we're seeing within COVID a push towards flexible living, a need for options that allow folks to have a place to stay for a few days, a few months, and in some cases a furnished rental for a year. And cities that are embracing this flexibility as a complement to hotels, which are really 1 or 2 day stays for one person, and to multifamily or single family, which is usually longer stays, multifamily being a year or more and single family being longer duration, I think are going to be ahead of the curve and are going to win out in the long run. For us, 90% of our guests are families and business travelers. Before COVID, this was geared more towards business travelers. It's not the hotel business traveler who's there, road warrior, staying 1 night or 2 nights, staying by themselves. It is someone on a week-long, 2-week-long contract, someone who's coming back to the city week after week for a consulting engagement. And often it's folks who are traveling with multiple coworkers and want to have a place to cook and to work together in the living area. So it's a different type of business travel. And before COVID, that was the majority. During COVID, business travel has become the minority and family travel has become the majority. So when I say it's about 70-30 before COVID, business, family, now it's 70-30, 70%, 30% family, business. And the reason folks are staying with us is when they're relocating, they're looking for a new place to live. They need to try out a city before they settle down in the city. Perhaps they're visiting family and friends and they don't want to live in their home because of safety precautions. We're also seeing a spike in doctors, nurses, essential workers who are staying with us. And so all of that is a during COVID phenomenon, but I think will be durable as COVID subsides. Length of stay, you mentioned, you're absolutely right. So the average length of stay before COVID-19 was 5 days for KASA. It's now ranges, it changes month to month, but it's anywhere between 10 and 20 day average length of stay. In all cases, it's much longer than the 1.1 days that folks are staying in hotels. And the average number of people in a KASA is about 2.9. And an average number of people in a hotel is closer to 1. So again, it's a different type of stay. It's a complementary type of stay. And it's one that is growing as the world progresses, and COVID has accelerated that growth.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so funny too, the mountain of different nuanced stories that you hear from people who need that type of accommodation ranges. But even just the other day, we had a friend who was a council member in a different city and suffered from some immune challenges with her own health and had a pretty big family. And just because of the type of job that her husband had, they had to make the choice to live separately. So the wife, who was a council member of all things, wound up staying in an accommodation like this for a good few weeks while the husband was doing things at the home, just so they weren't getting potentially mixed any germs. And his proximity to coming in contact with COVID was pretty high, so they were able to stay separate. Well, that's neat. Now, it occurred to me I need to be cognizant, council member, because I think you might need to step down here in a little bit. So we want to be good with your time. So you're in Denver. Denver is an extraordinarily beautiful town, great place to go visit, and so much to do there with events. But what I find is the number of businesses that take me to Denver, the number of conferences and activities is just daunting. I mean, Denver to me is becoming the better location to go if you're going to either do a business conference or something like that than what we used to do when we would go to Las Vegas years ago. Are you seeing kind of an increased growth in that type of activity, do you think?
I am, and actually I want to give a shout out to Visit Denver, who's participating right now. I see that they're in the attendees list. Certainly we have an economic powerhouse in our airport. Our Denver International Airport has recovered more than most of the other airports in the United States, and so we have really an economic engine. As you could tell by the virtual background, I represent a particular area of Denver. District 10 is right by the urban core, and so I have more than 70,000 constituents and more than 6,500 businesses, and so right by the city center. And definitely, we have a lot of people continuing to come to Denver because it is a gateway between the East and West, and we have an amazing airport that helps people get here. So it's a central destination. And by the way, I want to give a shout out to Texas. I grew up in Nacogdoches and went to SMU, got a computer science degree and an MBA in finance, both from SMU in Dallas. So I have Texas roots, but I have found a lovely spot here in the amazing slice of the world called Denver, Colorado.
Well, in August, you probably don't miss Nacogdoches or most of Texas. It gets pretty hot and it's so pleasant in Denver. That's great. Well, this is an interesting thing. We were going to talk a little bit with Molly Alexander about this as well. And so since we have, you and your policy mindset, here, one of the things that Molly was going to talk to us about in a moment is how we need to rethink potentially a post-COVID world of what are we doing with our urban cores and our downtown and commercial space and that sort of thing. Do you see people changing the way they're working, working differently and traveling differently after COVID?
Yeah, so computer science me, and we're talking about gig economy. We owe this our luxury of being able to continue to participate in a COVID society because of technology. We have a virtual platform, and so that's amazing. We have historically been resistant to adopting technology. There's something to be said to actually press flesh and shake someone's hand, and but with COVID, we are seeing a dramatic change back to a virtual platform or a dramatic change to a virtual platform rather. And even the city of Denver is, as a government, we have 15,000 employees, and we went virtual in the matter of a couple of weeks. And so change is hard, but we figured it out. And we see a lot of people, a lot of businesses that are also being willing to embrace the technology change, because we are forced to, thanks to the pandemic. And we'll see what remains to be seen. It's a bit of a truism, I guess, but we'll see how COVID, how much permanent change is because of COVID and how much change is temporary. So certainly, I hope that we can continue to press the flesh at some point in the future, but I think there will be a mix. Not everyone will continue to then fly to other places.
Right. And while we have you, I also want to ask you just about accessibility to spaces. And, one of the interesting things that I think this model, the urban model, the flex real estate model offers is that high degree of professionalism. So the high degree of transparency, of access and accessible spaces and marketing that effectively in a way that's, truly transparent to the traveler so that people can see, what different type of accommodations are offered out there. I just wanted to ask you really quickly if you had any thoughts on that while we have you.
Yeah, and I apologize. I do have another meeting in 14 minutes. So thank you for your accommodation. But speaking of accommodation, that's technology. Pretty good segue. Technology always precedes government. So I have an interesting intersection of technology, government, and disability, and so Colorado was the first state in the nation to create regulation about transportation network companies, Uber and Lyft, and that's a technology platform, right? And we were the electric vehicles. We're working hard to electrify and get rid of munching up dinosaurs and spewing them into the air. That's bad to the planet, and but there are no regulations about EV charging stations and accessibility either. In this case, In short-term rentals, the technology, the gig economy continues also to precede regulation. And so, in an ideal market, in an efficient market, corporations or stakeholders would compete against each other, and the people would win, and government would stay out. But it is also my job to represent all the people, and so I would, we've had a bunch of conversations, and I was inaugurated in July of 2019, so I've served not even a year and a half, but we've had a bunch of conversations with platforms, with short-term rental owners, and associated industries. And when I ask about accessibility, they go, "Oh, that's really interesting." And I've been to several countries since I was a runner and a soccer player growing up, and I had a crash, and so this is an acquired disability. So I had a lot of conversations about the platforms, and they say, "Oh, that's really interesting. Maybe we should consider broadening our platform or our short-term rental market for everyone, including people who need wheelchairs." But I'm pretty sure we're not there yet. So I still am relegated to traditional models like hotels, because I know that the Americans with Disabilities Act covers them, and the ADA is silent because on short-term rentals, because short-term rentals didn't exist when ADA was written 30 years ago.
Maybe I can add in, Chris. We have a bunch in common. I also studied computer science and then got my MBA, and we operate in Denver, but we operate in District 9, so a little bit north of District 10, right near Commons Park. But in Denver, to your point, the city is, I think, at the forefront. We went through a process to be ADA compliant, and so because we are hotel licensed in the property, and that is a requirement in the city. To comply with ADA rules. And so that is something that I think when the rules are clear, the industry wants to embrace. And so having clarity around how to get licensed and what the requirements of licensing are, help to provide accessibility options for folks. And for us, it's not just the right thing to do, but it's also smart business to be welcoming to folks who require accommodations. And that starts, in my view, online as much as it's offline. So being clear in our advertising around what accessibility options exist, whether there are grab bars, roll-in showers, communication equipment for the hard of seeing or hearing, that starts online so that you can make an informed decision and choice. And then offline, making sure there's the right the right accessibility features in the units is important, but it starts with the clarity on the clarity of what is required on the licensing and regulatory front.
And Adam, I might just ask you to pop in there for a quick second, because the other thing I think you and I have talked about in the past is that what professionalism brings, that professionalism brings uniformity of those things. It offers the guest kind of a greater understanding of the quality of property that they're going to find, and the, like Roman was saying, the transparency in the advertisement. You're professionally operating these accommodations. People are able to clearly see what they're going to get, and they have a great experience when they stay. That's my experience with professional accommodations like yours. But speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, we champion, much like Roman said, we champion not only the accessibility in unit, but also online, so we can welcome people from all walks of life and any challenges that they may have. And that's part of what I think is so important about the coalition that we've formed. The Flex Real Estate Coalition is to have that voice and to be able to engage with local authorities so that we can clearly lay out what is incumbent upon us to provide our guests, and whether they be with us for 1.1 nights or 1.1 months. So for us, it's really about understanding what is required by the city and then going above and beyond that so we can encourage all types of guests to be with us.
Yeah. So Molly, you're sitting here looking at all of this and talking about how is this changing downtowns? I mean, so many of the people that we talk to every day about these urban markets are talking about, potentially new landscape in their downtown, kind of urban centers. You're a master of this. You've been talking about downtown Austin, helping to reshape and recreate downtown Austin for a long time. What do you think? Where do you see this industry going, and how do you see it kind of playing into a greater, impact on changing our downtown communities?
It's a great question. And I think just a little bit more of a 30,000 foot level and looking at trends is kind of where I'd like to throw it out. And then maybe we have some discussions around it, or we shoot holes through it. But when we think about flexibility, a millennial generation who is demanding flexibility, and I think about it in Austin about 10 years ago when we no longer saw people in suits and ties. We began to see them in Birkenstocks and t-shirts and khakis and shorts going into offices, and office buildings and managers really upset by the fact that dogs were coming in and people were underdressed when they had other high-end potential tenants or clients. And, it really kind of shook up the market, but it's market demand. And so when we think about how market demand shifts real estate's a slow moving animal. How does market demand shift that? And so I think short-term rentals obviously came to the market as we thought about flexibility and the flexible uses of your own home, how to monetize it, the flexible uses of investments you've made in your life. I think we'll see it in autonomous vehicles at some point too, when we think about renting our own autonomous vehicle to monetize the cost and investment we've made, because we only use our vehicles, as an example, maybe 2 hours a day, 3 at the most. And so how do you monetize that? And how do you think about real estate as a way in which you monetize the land cost and the expenses? And how do you think about that? And we begin to see a lot of shifts in real estate and how particularly office and hotel has shifted. So we saw this in Europe first and in Asia, where hotels began to really think about how do you service different customers and different uses at different times of the day, where it might be you go down for breakfast and then it's a co-working space in the lobby at lunch, and then it becomes kind of a happy hour scene. And then how do you bring in local goods and local foods? And how do you then think about the hotel space as a more of a living unit than just a typical hotel that has amenities? And the concierge aspect is different because, you can literally work and live anywhere. And I think that a pandemic has really showed that employers are going to trust their employees who are adults to do their job. And those employees are going to say, I want more flexibility, not just working from home, but working from anywhere. So I think that if we think about where people are attracted to go, they're still going to be attracted to go to a central city where typically there's something to do, there's parks and open space, there's entertainment in a concentrated walkable area that is interesting, lively, and is part of the experience that you want in your daily life, in your weekly life, or in your visitor experience. And so I think that as we begin to see what's happening in the short-term rental market, I do believe there's more adoption of thinking about flexible uses. And I think we're going to see this in the office space. We've gone from offices to open air environments to now that's not really good in a pandemic. We've made all these investments. So how do you reimagine that space, and how do you think about flexible uses? We now know that pods are really important. The idea of pods in schools, pods in workspace, I think will come back that way. So how do we think about this as a much more flexible use than we've defined through zoning and through uses, the use of our cities and really maximizing those uses? I also think about it with parks and open space. I think about it with retail spaces. I just see this shift going forward that we're not going to go back to the 4 walls defined as a house or an office. We're going to define that based on our need and the use that we have at the moment. So that's what I think is very exciting about cities and city building. And that's where innovation occurs. Innovation happens when people get together and create new ideas. It also happens in a crisis. So the best thing about a pandemic or a crisis is at the other end, we're going to have a great deal of innovation. It's going to be quite exciting, in my opinion, to see what comes out of it. As hard as it's been, as we're in the midst of it, the upside is the innovation, creativity, and solutions we're going to bring out of it. If we can create a vaccination in a year, my God, what can we do in our cities?
Wow.
Yeah, I think Molly makes a great point. We focus on the modern day business traveler, and that doesn't mean just someone who is working for Bain or for Google, but for someone like myself who works for smaller companies. And we are always working. We're always on our phones. We're always on our computers, and that's kind of where our sweet spot is. And before COVID, we really focused on the nightly stays, and we had to develop a new muscle to cater to our guests who are going to be with us for a month or 2 months. And even now, we're seeing our business travelers account for over 80% of our travel, and that's medical professionals. That's displaced travelers who need to find a place to work because they couldn't return to either their home country or their city, relocation. So all these alternative uses that are now being leveraged by our beautiful spaces in 11 cities is really interesting to us. And people are just as productive or more productive working from home. And I think, as Molly so well put it, the innovation that's going to happen and the customization that will happen on a company level and at a product like ours is really exciting to learn and to watch and be part of.
And Councilmember, I know that we promised we'd get you out of here on time. Do you have any just quick final thought before I know you're going to have to camera off?
Yeah, the reason I'm an elected official today is because of the intersection of disability and policy. And so being a straight white male from middle-aged white male from rural Texas, I didn't really experience any sort of discrimination in the past, and it is systemic. I didn't realize the discrimination against people with disabilities until I experienced it. So in urban markets, that is where we as a society have made the most accommodations for the disability community, just because it just makes economic sense. It's a smart business decision. And so I would encourage, particularly in short-term rental, operators in urban core, for them to, if you're looking at a platform, if you're creating a platform, actually make it accessible, make even the website accessible, so that I don't have to go ask, how do you tell if your units are wheelchair accessible, and then have the response, well, what city you're going to, or well, our units have an accessible elevator. Well, that isn't exactly, an elevator isn't it. There's more. There's the access to the toilet, to the shower, etc. And that is a real life example that we did just this morning with a short-term rental operator that is a panelist in this conference. So just throwing it out there. I'm not trying to skewer anyone individually. I'm just trying to say that this is an active conversation that I'm really excited that we're continuing to have, and I'm really excited to hear Roman say that. And I'm sorry, did I Ramon?
No, perfect, Roman.
Okay, that you are actively interested in making sure that you can collect money from anyone, frankly, ability or disability. So thank you so much. And again, I apologize that I have to scoot on. So thank you for the time, and we'll stay in touch.
No, thank you. Thank you. Well, so for everybody watching, stay on, because we're not going anywhere. But thank you, Councilmember. We sure do appreciate you. Roman, Adam, Molly, the big question here is also, we're talking about short-term rental regulations, and this session was billed as best practice urban markets. One of the reasons is because we really do see this, and we hear this time and time again, that this model, professional managers that are operating these commercial mixed-use multifamily spaces, not in low density or single family neighborhoods, seems to be the answer for these larger urban destinations. You guys just speak freely to that. I'll start with you, Roman, but are you hearing that in the different communities where you're operating?
The question is around compliance and around safety protocols, or around, is this the answer to making, is that the question?
No, I think compliance with people following regulations, it's easier to achieve compliance with this model.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you're comparing us against individual hosts for whom this isn't their full-time job, and who, for whom there are thousands of different people who are running their own hotel operations, then there's absolutely no question that we are much more focused and equipped to comply with regulation. For us, it's a business necessity, right? It's our livelihood. It is the reason for being as a company. And so if we don't comply with the regulations, we don't exist. So we have an entire team dedicated to ensuring that we're working with each of the municipalities that we're in to abide by the licensing regime, by the occupancy tax remittance regime, that we have clear communications with the stakeholders across the city departments and with the neighboring communities. In our mission statement, the neighbors are really a core stakeholder as much as the owners of the properties and the guests. And so we really care about working real collaboratively to ensure that we're complying. What does compliance mean to us? It means that we are following the right, it means the requirements, right? So the ADA compliance, the licensing regime, but it also means going above and beyond and ensuring that we're following appropriate protocols on cleaning and on safety, making sure we're providing and requiring masks to both our team members and PPE and masks to both our team members and our guests, confirming if any, in the context of COVID, confirming if any guests have COVID-19 symptoms and providing a path for them to let us know and act appropriately in those cases. So it's a comprehensive toolkit. There's also on the neighbor side, we're really focused on ensuring that our guests are good members of the community. So in every one of our units, we have decibel meters, we have cigarette and marijuana detectors. We run background checks, just like multifamily communities run background checks on residents. We do the same for those who are staying with us. And folks have to go through a comprehensive set of questions and sign agreements that they are abiding by our rules in order to stay with us. And the reason we do it is to ensure that folks who stay with us are held to a really high standard within the community. We've heard of complaints about unprofessional hosts having party houses or having issues with folks smoking on property or causing problems in the community. And for us, it's really crucial that we are partners to communities, not causing issues for communities.
And Adam, you get a different type of traveler, right? I mean, you're the type of travelers that you and Roman see in the urban market, is different than what people probably see in that single family home typically. I mean, you're getting, like you said, a business traveler or families that want to be in the urban center, probably a little bit more, I hate to say mature, but, a little bit more mature, less likely to do anything, that might cause any neighborhood concern.
Yeah, and we do similar background checks and have the electronic monitors that Roman mentioned as well. I think that as much as it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we're abiding by the rules and regulations set forth by each city, which varies wildly across the different municipalities we're in, we really want to work collaboratively with those cities to ensure that all the information that we need to ensure compliance is readily available online, and we welcome those conversations at any time, and obviously in the future with what we're doing with the Flex Real Estate Coalition. And it's really a partnership that we see that we can help these cities who do want to make sure that there's compliance, both from a safety perspective, so making sure that the life and safety aspects that we abide and hold so true in each of our units to ensure the safety of our guests as well as the other tenants in the building. If there are other tenants, we're not operating the entire building. But also to make sure that these guidelines are easily found online, and then that it's easy to access for everyone, not just for us.
And Matt, I think Austin had a great example with Uber and Lyft. So when public policy it's a slow machine, and it takes 18 months, and it cannot keep up with a market and market forces as we've seen in the past decade. And so how can you begin to think about laying the groundwork for public policy that both does what it needs to do, protect human life, welfare and safety, and allow things to happen within boundaries, and not really and still move at the speed of the market if possible. It's so difficult because what happened in Austin obviously is the local government said no, and Uber and Lyft then fought it at the state legislature. And when you think about local control and the importance of that, but also the importance of recognizing when industries are pushing boundaries and this is not going to stop, how do you begin to think about leadership and really beginning to bring all of the partners to the table and recognizing you're going to have to move faster or you'll lose control of, in my opinion, of local regulation more and more, because it's a lot easier sometimes to fight it at the state house than it is at every single city council in every single municipality. So I think that we've got to rethink how we shape public policy when it comes to new innovators in the market.
And so, Molly, you've seen this activity, this specific type of flex real estate model grow in Austin. Would you say that it's been an asset to downtown?
Well, I think it depends, Matt. You probably know better than I. It's been difficult. I mean, market forces in Austin and the cost of building structures, I don't think it's been as viable in downtown as it has been in other parts of the market and other nodes like the Domain, which is north of downtown, and a multi-use, multi-purpose center. So I think that with a pandemic and the changing aspects of real estate, that could change. I think that broader than just in downtown Austin, I think it's an interesting play on how to build more residential in downtown and thinking about it more flexibly. Maybe not that short-term, that hotel user, as we said, is 1 to 3 nights. Short-term rentals are longer stays, rebuilding retail and the restaurant industry. I think short-term rentals have a really important place in developing what I would call shorter term residents, as opposed to those, there's some place in between a apartment, a condo, a hotel, and short-term rentals has a place, and it has a place in a downtown economy, in my opinion.
Molly, we're in 3 properties in downtown Austin, and we're very glad that downtown Austin as a whole has a very clear process for getting licensed. So we're type 3. We have type 3 vacation rental licenses in all those locations. But in those cities, what we've been seeing is occupancy in a lot of properties has dropped on the multifamily side in some instances, not necessarily specific to Austin. And owners of properties are noticing a need to supplement their traditional 12-month leases with an option for people to stay for a few weeks, a few months in a furnished apartment. And that often helps fill, 5-10% of the building that's now vacant when it wasn't before, and also complements their existing larger part of the property that is long-term housing. So it's a nice, in Austin and other downtowns, it's a very nice complement to the use of the majority of the building.
Yeah, and however, in some municipalities, they're putting caps on the number of short-term rentals that can be in a building, which is limiting the stakeholder, meaning the multifamily owner, the freedom to choose what they want to do in their building. So we would love to, and we are having those conversations in those municipalities to be able to sensibly design new regulation that can help satisfy the needs of all the stakeholders in the city.
So, Adam, in that circumstance, when the cities have designed something when there's a significant cap on the number of properties in a building, my sense is that it limits your ability as a professional operator to operate there. But it's encouraging what we were talking about in the last session as the casual operator. The challenge is, as we were discussing in the last session, casual operators are less likely to comply with local rules, local laws, and pay taxes. Yeah. So, do you find that to be true? That is your ability to operate limited when that significant cap is being placed on that per building model?
Unfortunately, yes. As the model grows and as Manhouse ourselves grow, we prefer to control the guest experience, not just in 5 or 6 units, but in an entire floor or an entire building, which helps us manage the life and safety and in that building. So as you just highlighted, it encourages the onesie twosie to operate in a building really unfettered unless the city has the resources to ensure that the compliance on the life and safety and on the tax side and all the things that are important to everyone on this call be enforced. So it's a conversation that we welcome and encourage to have us at the seat of the table, so that some unintended consequences that may not be considered because people don't understand the model or understand the difference between us as a professionally managed operator and the mom and pop.
And Roman, in some circumstances, you're also being used. You'd mentioned earlier the finances that you bring to the owner of a building, operator of a building. In some cases, you're also part of the construction of a new building, aren't you?
Yeah, I actually think it's an important point as it relates to housing available in a city broadly, right? Typically, what we're seeing is we're giving owners, we're maybe taking 5 to 20% of the units in a building that are otherwise vacant apartments, and allowing those owners to convert what is vacancy and underutilized into cash flow. It allows cities to collect occupancy taxes and otherwise underutilized or not utilized space. And then it gives owners the confidence to build their next building, because they know that they have the flexibility in developing the next property to fill the space regardless of market conditions. So in a world where people aren't moving as quickly to a city, they can allow for a more flexible use. In a world where they're able, in a world where folks are moving en masse, they're able to fill the space with a long-term tenancy. And so we're often partnering both with buildings that are already developed and buildings that are in development. That gives owners the confidence to continue with construction, to get financing from lenders, and ultimately to add more properties and housing and flexible options for places to stay into cities.
And Molly, just tell me real quick, are you seeing a different type of traveler coming to Austin than you did, let's say, even just 5-10 years ago? Are you seeing people who are coming downtown for, different types of experiences?
Well, I mean, I think during a pandemic, what we're seeing right now, after essentially travel flatlined this spring, is we're seeing more drive-in. So it's more drive-in destination based. So, our other Texas cities, and clearly states around us where it's 10 hours or less to drive. So we're seeing a lot of the leisure travel market coming back, clearly not the business travel. I think that Austin is a unique city in that prior to the pandemic, there weren't a lot of available hotel nights. So typically, if you're a business travel city, you're filling Sunday through Thursday, and then you're backfilling Thursday through Sunday with leisure travel. And Austin has really strong business and leisure. A lot of the revenue per available room was quite high, occupancy was quite high, and that's why we continue to see, even in a pandemic, more hotels being built. So additional product on the market, probably recovery in 2023 or 24 when it comes to the business side, but we're definitely seeing a pickup on the leisure side, which we're quite pleased with. And the demand for Austin is multifaceted because of events, because of entertainment. We had 125 restaurants and 200 and some odd bars and live music venues and retail in downtown. We'll see what happens post-pandemic, but we still have a really great vibe and a great city with a great amenities. So,
and I think it's an important point to remember that because we are bringing the modern day business travel or even leisure travelers that are staying for longer than the typical 3 nights, they're supporting the local economy. So that might be the coffee shop that is close to the multifamily building that we're in, or they develop a relationship with the restaurant owner or the favorite bartender or barista in where they are, because they're there for longer periods of time. And so they're able to establish and get to know that city more intimately than they would otherwise. And the taxes for less than 30 days that we're collecting and remitting to the city is also more substantial than would be for hotels, who are people are coming, like Molly said, for just a couple of nights because they can't stay in a unit like ours, which is apartment style accommodation that has a nice living room and a bedroom, a separate bedroom, and a kitchen. So they feel more comfortable staying for longer periods of time and not just shoehorning themselves into a bedroom and a bathroom.
There isn't a question in the chat, and I just wanted to speak to it real quickly, Matt. So just a question about STRs, are changing housing demands, and we're not speaking about single family neighborhoods. And I'm just going to say that's not my expertise. In a downtown or an urban environment, zoning is very different. So I can't speak to that, but I wanted to address the fact that there is that question, whether it's relevant now, or you're going to speak and address it later.
And I was just to add in, I think, to echo what you're saying, Molly, the question is, STRs as they relate to single family neighborhoods, why are those allowed? And our focus as a company, I think this panel's focus is on STRs in urban environments and commercially zoned properties. And so we're not speaking to the impact of STRs in single family neighborhoods, because that's not our focus. We believe that there's a place for STRs in commercially zoned areas where they add to the vibrancy and flexibility of those neighborhoods. Yeah, and just from a definition perspective, when Roman says commercially zoned areas, it's apartment buildings. So we're in Roman and KASA and Mintaus exclusively operate in apartment buildings versus a single family residence.
So yeah, that's why we came up with this. The concept for this session is, it seems that time and time again, when we look at bigger cities, this model seems like that easy solution for what so many cities are desiring, which is compliance, a great experience for the traveler, uniformity and transparency, which is something we were talking about with Councilmember Hines. That great vibrancy being brought to the downtown urban core, but not impacting the low density single family homes, where so often the casual operators are engaged in this activity. And sometimes you hear a lot of concern from communities about that as well. So it does seem like this is a great solution for urban markets. Molly, just to wrap up real quick, you've gone through so many policy discussions. For Roman, for Adam, for people who are engaged in this, what's the easiest way to approach a city council member? Is there an easy path to start getting a sensible policy discussion started?
Well, Matt, you probably have a better answer than I do, but I just think it's important to sit down and discuss the issues, the outcomes, the concerns, and the opportunities. There's risk always in public policy, and most politicians are a bit risk averse. So I think recognizing not only your own position, but the positions that are counter to yours and bringing them to the table is really important to getting to a solution quickly and getting to yes. I think oftentimes in public policy, the answer starts with no, as opposed to how do we get to yes? And yes may not be the answer. It may not come in the form that we all want, but that's what we should be doing in building cities, is how do we get to yes, recognizing all of the issues and trying to solve for them as best we can.
Great. Adam, Roman, any thoughts for you guys about a great way for policymakers or destination marketing leaders that are on this, that are attending here today, to engage with you and have a discussion about how to create good policy around this model?
Just inviting companies like KASA or Mintaus to have a seat at the table, just to discuss and hear our voice as to how we can be additive to the discussions that are being considered, or any type of regulatory change. As I said previously, that the unintended consequences may not be illuminated because of, we know our business very well, and we want to be good standing citizens in every city that we're in. So the more that we can be brought to the table and be part of that conversation, we very much welcome. And I know Mintaus would welcome that at any time going forward. So my email is adam@mintaus.com, and very much welcome those conversations.
Yeah, likewise. I think at the end of the day, I want to emphasize that we want to comply with requirements in the city. We want to get licensed. We want to pay taxes to make sure we're giving back to the community. We want the important thing for us actually is the clarity around the rules and the process of complying with those rules. And so that's why we welcome the discussion with cities. We view neighbors as a key stakeholder, and cities are part of that stakeholder. So the more we can engage and provide clarity around rules, process, and payment for taxes, the better.
That's a great message to wind up on. So again, if you heard me during the first session, this is the awkward moment where we would be saying thanks, and you guys would be hearing a loud round of applause, and you'd be stepping down from the stage. But we hope that next year we're all able to do this live together for our third conference on short-term rental regulations. So we hope that all of you guys will join us then, instead of just having to, and live and in person, we're able to shake hands and hug and everything at that time. But thank you each. Thank you, Molly. Thank you, Roman. Thank you, Adam. And a very special thank you to Councilmember Chris Hines from Denver. Everybody had some really great points, really great takeaways that we could talk about. I really loved hearing from Molly about the reimagining of downtowns and how we have to start thinking of, what are we going to do potentially different with space. I think America's urban markets have been in a renaissance for 20 years. They're we have the greatest cities in the world all throughout our country. One of them is Denver. One of the reasons they're so successful, Councilmember had told us, because they have that great airport. It's such a great destination, and they were able to build a vibrant downtown because of it. Of course, Austin here, because of Molly and all of the work that she and so many people in her universe and her team have done. And then, of course, so many of these cities are vibrant because of being able to evolve and adopt these new changing trends, including this flex real estate model that comes with the commercial mixed-use multifamily apartment building type properties, allowing different types of travelers who are looking for a different type of stay come to these cities and help create a stronger, more robust economy.